Greetings. Okay, so it's been 24 hours since my last tinkering with this clock, and I'm happy to report that it is still running. And as promised, it's time for me to deliver some plans and details and templates of the escapement mod that I created for this, the Wrebbit Peace Tower Paper Clock. Now, I did make the diagrams, okay? You just print them out, glue them on the wood, cut them out, you're ready to go. But I'm far too lazy to write down all the steps of what really needs to occur. So that's what this video is. This is a video instruction of how to use my escapement mod for this clock. Before I get into what it is and how to do it, I wanted to kind of go through the rough details of why I felt this was necessary. Then I'm going to go over the plans themselves and give you a step-by-step guide on what to do with them. Then I'm going to talk about the modifications of the clock itself that you have to do aside from the parts that you're creating with my mod, if you want to use it, to make it all fit and work. And some of it's a little involved, but if you've already gotten this far with the clock, you're used to that. So let's go over this. Out of the box, this clock has a gravity escapement, I think it's called, which is really useful in large clock towers because the amount of stress on like 15-foot, minute, and hour hands from the wind blowing on it and ice and snow and everything else, that torque doesn't feed backwards through the mechanism because of the style of escapement that it comes with. Gravity, I think there's more to it, but I think it's called a gravity escapement. It's great for big clock towers because it will regulate time even if the wind is blowing hard. On little clocks like this, though, it's far too noisy and far too inefficient. So what ends up happening is, unless you want to mount the clock 60 feet in the air, you only get about an hour or two of runtime before you have to wind it back up. You can't just sit here and babysit the clock all day. That's not the purpose of it. So if you wanted a clock that's going to run all day, use this mod that I've created, this homebrew modification. Gosh, listen to me. So what I've done is I've replaced it with Deadbeat style escapement, and then I had to modify a couple of the gears in the gear train to fix the timing of it all. Otherwise, the clock would run far too slow. Yes, that's it, slow. If you don't choose not to use these gears, what you'll end up with is a 24-hour clock instead of a 12-hour clock, which is fine if you're into that sort of thing, but the dials wouldn't make sense. And moving on. So I created an escapement out of wood that gives the clock about 15 hours of runtime based on, let's see, I'm almost, on a good day, I'm 6 foot tall. So that's how high this clock is mounted, about 5 feet, starting there. And with 5 feet of runtime, you get about 15 hours. So you wind it twice a day, you're good to go. Morning when you wake up, and at night when you go to bed. I have it right by my bed, so that's perfect. It works out. So there's several modifications you'll need to make if you want to use my mod. So let's go over the diagrams, a link to which you can download this as a PDF document. Is posted below this video and every other video featuring this clock. All of the updates, all 14 or 15 of them now. It's crazy. So you get the paper and print it out, and you'll notice there's 4 pages, and on the last page is this one. First thing you want to do is get a standard index card and make sure that that page fits the index card. If it does, if it fits perfectly, then you know that it's printed out to scale and you're in good hands. So let's go over these. The first page is the new escapement. What you want to do is cut this out generally, just a big circle around the gear, big oval around the anchor or verge or whatever you call that. I'm going to call it the anchor. So big cutout around the gear, around the anchor, and do that for everything on all these pages. Big cutout for that gear. That's the new minute gear, goes here in the middle. That's the new minute pinion. I know it's a little big for a pinion. That goes down here. That's this one hanging out of the bottom. And I have not put any spokes on these, but you can just leave them solid. I chose to cut out some spokes because I like the clock to be as see-through as possible. Get creative with your spokes. It really doesn't matter as long as there's something connecting the teeth to the axle. So you cut these out generally and then glue them with some light glue onto a piece of 1/4-inch wood. I got a big sheet of this stuff from Lowe's or Home Depot or wherever. This is a nice wood. You can see the grain, and I don't know if it's composite or not. I think it is, but it looks nice and I like it. So that's what I chose to use for the gears. Use something heavy and strong, but keep in mind the harder the wood, the more momentum the gears are going to have going around, and that's going to take torque as it starts and stops, which may make your clock run funny or not at all. So you got to balance the kind of wood you use. I don't know anything about wood, or I'd give you more info than that. Okay, so you've cut out your gears, you glued them on the wood. I like to use just standard Elmer Craft School glue. This stuff. But I like to pour it into a small jar, like a baby food jar, and cut it with 1/3 water, just to make it spread a little easier and dry a little faster. And then brush that onto your wood, slap your gear on top of it, and then cut it out. Rough it first, and then get it. You have to have a scroll saw, and cut it out of the scroll saw. Now, most scroll saws have a speed adjustment, and I didn't figure this out till like my 6th or 7th attempt at this. You could turn that speed down as far as you can stand, because the slower that saw goes, the less shaking it's going to give you, and you'll be able to get a much more accurate and precise cut. Leave just a hair's width on either side of each tooth. That way you can come back with the Dremel tool to smooth it out and end up right where you need to be with the gear. This is, of course, the back of the gear. So if you glue this onto a piece of wood, keep in mind that's going to be the back. That way the paper side is facing the back. It'll look a little nicer. So when you put the paper on it, on the wood, keep in mind the paper is on the back. And therefore you don't have to bother reversing this. And the same is true with the anchor there. These are polarity insensitive, but you can put the paper on the back if you're too lazy to cut the paper off or sand it off. Okay, so that's what to do with these. This piece is not really a piece. This is like a measuring tool to show you what the ideal distance between these two axes, between these two axles are. You can't really see it on the video, but when you print this out, you will. There's a little circle with a dot there and there. Those are supposed to be the points where these line up. Okay, this line represents the ideal distance from axle to axle and should help you figure out where it goes exactly in your clock whenever you're putting this escapement up there, because there's going to be a lot of eyeballing. Not that that's any different from the original clock. Okay, so you got 3 pages of gears, and then you've got this, which if you've gotten this far on the clock, you should be able to recognize this as a pinion kit. It's a kit to build a little paper pinion, and whenever I was making this mod, I wasn't sure if it was going to work, so I did not want to rip the actual pinion off of the original escapement. I wanted to keep everything whole. That way, if this didn't work, I could always go back to the original escapement. So I decided to create a second pinion that matches the first. There's 4 kinds. There's fat and wide, there's skinny, and there's thick ones, thin ones, and then there's big ones and little ones. So there's 4 kinds, 2 of each. And this is a big fat one, which is the kind that's on there. This will, okay, so you print this out, cut these pieces out, line them up on an index card, and trace them on the index card. And then you cut them out of the index card and just construct it like you would any other pinion for this clock. And they'll end up perfect. And you can use that as a secondary, as a backup pinion for your escape wheel. That way you don't have to take apart the first one you made, in case you ever want to go back to it. Okay, so that's a pinion. And then the last thing that you're going to need to build, which I have neglected to include on my instructions, cuss me, I'm just the worst, is the bar that holds the anchor at the top, the adjustment bar. So what you'll need is I've just drawn this on my hand. I don't know if I should. I'm not going to bother uploading this because it's pretty simple. You just need a 1/4 inch piece of wood. Get you some wood. You need a 7-inch long, 1/2 inch wide, 1/4 inch thick piece of wood. On the end, you will round one end and drill a hole through the middle of it. And then you also need a 4-inch long piece that is 3/4 of an inch, 0.75 inch long, and that's going to be like an arm. Like imagine this there goes on like that. So that you'll see whenever I actually hold the camera up here how this all goes together. But the measurements are 4 inches, 3/4 of an inch, and then just eyeball this part in here to get it wide enough to accommodate a 1/4 inch thick gear plus maybe some washers or something. I put tiny little 8mm bearings in here, but you don't need to do that. Just a little Teflon lubricant is fine. So this makes the cross arm brace that the whole escapement mounts into. And you'll need to make that. Well, let me see if I can get this straight for you so you can get a good picture of it. I don't know if this is lining up or not, but there you go. Okay, so that's the paper. Did I cover everything on these pages? Draw some fun-looking spokes in there and cut them out however you like. Look at my Petros clock update 3, I think. Talks about how to cut out the middle of a spoke. All right, so that's the second part. We covered why you need the mod. We covered what to do with the paper that I've linked to. Now we're going to cover the modifications you need to actually make to the clock to get this all to fit. So we're going to take a little trip here, and sorry if this gets dizzying. Whoa! Okay, so on this clock, let's look at this escapement. You can see the arm bar here. Here's the 3/4 inch wide, 4-inch long brace. And you can see the anchor mounted in the middle of it. And then here's the adjustment arm here. That's 7 inches long. And the rounded end will actually tuck into this brace back here. You can see it here. That's rounded inside of the brace. This left side of the frame has been cut out to make a hole for that to mount into. And then I've poked a hole, and then the hole that's been drilled on the end there, I've just got like a toothpick or something holding it in. So let's go around this side and look. Okay. So originally, out of the box, this piece of the frame isn't there. What you get is a diagonal piece from this corner up to this corner. It's a diagonal piece. So I cut that diagonal piece off because I needed something like this. Cut this diagonal piece off, shortened it, and ended up mounting it here. It became this piece. All right? Did the same thing on the other side. There was a diagonal piece from here to here. I cut it out and then remounted it vertically. And this one, I've hollowed out the entire, both left and right sides of that piece. Okay? To make some room where the wooden rod or wooden bar sticks through so I can adjust that up and down. And what that does is affects the height of the anchor itself on the escapement, makes it super easy to adjust because like a millimeter adjustment over here is only 1/2 millimeter adjustment in the middle since this side is fixed, making it super easy to adjust that. Okay, the other thing you'll have to do is, we gotta get up on top here. Okay, right here is a set screw. I've drilled a small hole carefully through the edge, kind of cantered about 45 degrees into the anchor. And then I've taken a wood screw and sawed the end of it off to make it super short and flat. And I'm using that as a set screw to hold the anchor onto the axle instead of glue. That way I can adjust it easily. I don't have to worry about breaking and re-gluing it every time my adjustment's a little bit off. Because in the back, I don't know if you can see the pendulum arm down there, that is all made of paper. I just took, how long do you think that is? That's about 7 inches. Honestly, I totally eyeballed the pendulum arm. It hangs down to where... Ooh, okay, so you got this gear train here, right? You got the big gear, second gear, and then the escapement up here. Where this one's axle, the second gear, this one's axle is down here. That's about how long the pendulum arm is. From that axle up to where it's coming through up here. Well, I don't know how long it is. You just eyeball it when you get your clock apart. And I don't know if you can get close enough to see the construction of that pusher arm. It's a piece of paper that I folded in about 1 inch and then glued and folded it over and glued and folded it over until I got a nice rigid beam with rounded edges to maintain its rigidity. The pendulum itself, I have cut a slit right down the middle. There's no way you're going to be able to see it. I've cut a slit right down the middle so that the peg on the end of the pendulum pushing arm can go through that slit down the middle. Okay, let me just... Okay, so down here on the pendulum, let's stop it for a second. Stop. Okay, take your knife and make an incision a couple inches long right down the middle. Okay, and hollow it out so you can push a peg all the way through. And then maybe reinforce that with some paper glued on the inside to hold it open like a trench. And that is exactly what I did up here for the pushing pendulum arm. Okay, and then I just used a ton of super glue on a toothpick or an axle rod, maybe like this. The rods that come with your kit are like this, except they're made of metal. But what I did was I went to Walmart, and in their craft section, I found a pack of these tiny wooden dowels that were the exact same diameter as the axles that come in the kit. How lucky is that? It's just a little bigger than a toothpick, about the same size as a coffee stirrer. So find something like that you can use for additional axles, because that's what I'm using up there. All right, let's get her going again. Whoop, just a little tippy tap, maybe the other way, tippy tap. There we go. Okay, so you can see how this is constructed with the arm and the bracer and the pendulum pusher and the anchor and the escape wheel. And oh, right there, that is my backup pinion made out of an index card. It's just the same as the original pinion. I just wanted a spare. That way I didn't have to destroy the original escapement. Everything else is the same all the way down through here. Okay, once you get past the motor spool, you come to the first of the changed out gears. Ordinarily, it's just a regular pinion in there, but I have changed it out with a significantly larger gear to turn down the gear ratio. Now, another modification I had to make to get all this to fit is right over here, this side of the frame. This gear, not being perfectly centered as it is, was catching on the frame. So I had to cut off an edge of the frame, and I reinforced it with some wood on the inside of there. I just slid it into the frame and glued it. That way to make the frame a little bit wider to accommodate these big fat teeth. You might have to do that. Keep an eye out for that. And then the last one is, and this could be the most complicated part, is the minute gear here. You can see I've got it doubled up just because I was so lazy when I was cutting it. I didn't get my axle perfectly perpendicular through it, and the whole gear wobbles. So rather than cut a new one, I just doubled it up so that it would mesh with the teeth down here on its pinion. Okay, so when you're building this, you'll notice that the clock has a little ratcheting in there that allows you to set the time without having to wind the gears. It's not necessary, but it is convenient. I've got the hour hand intentionally just snug fit, not glued on, so I can adjust that at will anyway. And you can probably figure out a similar system for the minute arm, even though it's fitted onto a square peg. I don't remember how that square peg is hooked on down there, but I'm sure there's a way to snug fit it too and bypass the need for a ratchet altogether. But if you insist on recreating the same ratchet on the original gear like I did, be my guest. It wasn't very difficult, but the little pegs that catch on the ratchet, I had to drill holes into the gear, into the 4 spokes of the gear, and recreate those pegs and recreate. I literally traced the original paper covering, call it like a hubcap or whatever. I retraced that and recreated it out of index card. But again, that's not necessary. If you've just snug fit your hands, you should be able to turn them manually and bypass the need for that ratchet altogether. So, are there any other changes that you have to make to fit this mod? Man, that looks good. Oh, I could watch that all day. I love it. Tips and tricks. I have hot glued it to the wall to stop it from swinging, because the clock is so light it can literally swing itself rather than the pendulum. So I tried just lines. Now I have glue there to stop it from bouncing around. The easier solution is actually take a piece of scrap wood, not as big as this one, but you get the idea, and glue it to the wall on either side as like a brace, just a little piece. I think I did that before in a previous location. That way the clock just sits on them, and you make sure that it's always level. Even when you wind it, it won't skip around. Makes it much easier to wind it. Okay, the weight. The weight is a little bit more than what the book recommends. I forget, but this is going to vary from clock to clock anyway. In order to find the correct weight for your clock, here's what you do. Let me see if I can get this back to the way it was. How does that look? Oh, that'll work just fine. Okay, so here's how you figure out how much weight your clock will need. So you take your escapement, first stop it, take your escapement and disengage it. Okay, it's just going to start spinning on its own. That's a good sign. Now I'm going to take my weight off. So get like a bottle of water. That's it. Put some tape over the lid that you can make a hook into, and fill it up with a little bit of water. You know, you might have to take 2 bottles. That's a little more than a bottle, maybe a can of soup or something. And start putting it on there and putting water or pennies or whatever into your container until the escapement just starts to turn on its own. No more. If it just starts to turn. Just enough to maintain motion with the escapement totally disengaged. Okay, and this is also a good way to figure out if there's like a spot on your clock where it's rubbing. If you have to pull real hard on one particular section just to get it to keep turning, that's a bad sign. Yeah, see, I still got some kinks to work out, clearly. If you get it going real fast and let go, it will inevitably stop on any rough spots. Nope, right there. So you can figure out what's going on in that rough spot to make it rough. Maybe I need to Dremel out a tooth somewhere on one of the gears. Oof, that's crazy. So anyway, you'll get it to just barely turn, and then add just a little bit more, maybe another 1/3 of a pound or something, just to get past those rough spots. And that's how you figure out how much weight your clock needs. Don't put any more than you have to, because this paper clock just cannot handle it. Let's see if I can get the escapement right. Ready? Go. I said go. Oh, this is just such a work of precision. And I'm making it out of paper mache. What am I doing? What am I doing? All right. I think I've covered everything with my Deadbeat escapement mod. If you have any questions about the mod or about what I've done, just leave it in the comments and I'll get to it. Just please don't ask for any more documentation, just one-off questions, because I'm just not organized enough to really make a proper instruction manual for this. So I'm hoping this video will do, and I hope you enjoy your clock, and I hope your clock works for many years. May your clock never stop. Thank you for joining me.